What do you think about the Laker team now?
Do you follow the box scores of the games every day? Just the Lakers.
You're kidding. That is really a compliment. I was pleased to see you smile at the top of our show, because once the game starts, you have a game face. You don't smile much out there.
I don't think you have to do things for money anymore.
Correct.
All right, what's up, Laker fans? Welcome to Laker Film Room Radio. If you've ever killed some time at work watching strength and weaknesses videos when you should be working, or staying up late at night, the guest that we have on today is, you're familiar with his work. He's probably done more to increase the knowledge base of the average NBA fan than pretty much anybody out there in the NBA sphere. It's a real honor to have Mike Schmitz of Draft Express on. Mike, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, I'm good, man. I appreciate the kind intro. That's very nice. But yeah,
man, I got to take a moment. Like, I'm co-hosting a show with Darius Soriano, interviewing Mike Schmitz, both of whom I was fans of for years and years before they knew of my existence. So if I pass out, like a teenage girl at a One Direction concert, Darius, I trust that you can carry it from here. You got it, D?
Yeah, we'll just dog you the whole time. Is that all right?
That's right. Yeah. I'll have to take a pay cut for this show, but right. Yeah. Tom will put Sharpie on my face, right? And so yeah, man. Anyway, let's get into it, gentlemen. Lakers recently got the number 2 pick in the draft, and kind of the presumptive guy at this point, which who knows exactly how presumptive he should be, but is Lonzo Ball. Kind of a lot of the direction, a lot of the information, a lot of the collective thought is that the Lakers are going to take him. So, Mike, I'm curious of a couple things on him, just kind of your general overview of him, and from an amateur position where I'm sitting. He's been one of the more difficult guys I've ever scouted, because he's so unconventional. I'm curious, have you, having scouted thousands of guys yourself, have you had a similar experience, kind of trying to figure out who Lonzo Ball is?
Absolutely. He's one of the most unique players I think I've ever scouted. And he was kind of an acquired taste in some ways, just because of his background and his situation. I always thought he could be a lottery type of guy, a potential top 10 type of guy. But I kind of wanted to wait and see just how things would go at UCLA, because, at Chino Hills, it was run and gun, long outlet passes. You guys have probably seen the YouTube clips of just kind of the lack of defense, but also just the chaotic style in which they play. And I wanted to see, how that was going to fit in kind of a more what I thought would have been a more structured system at the college level. But, I quickly realized that he just kind of brought all that with him. And I think that's a sign of a great player, in that, everything morphed around him and kind of changed for him. And he turned that whole UCLA program around. So I'm definitely with you in that he's a strange player. He's a unique player. But he's so talented and so gifted. For me, he's the number 2 guy just because he makes everybody better. I think he's going to, guys are going to want to play with him. There's the stuff with the dad and all that and whatever. I don't really put a ton of stock in that. I just think when this guy is, spoon feeding you 20 points a game and earning you money, guys aren't going to have much to say in that regard. So he's a guy you want to play with. He's a culture changer type of guy. I'm very high on Lonzo.
And what are the components of his game that you think translate right away? Because I think he's a guy that there are some areas where it's going to take him a minute, pick and roll being an example. I just don't think he has a ton of experience running it, at least in the conventional sense that they do in the NBA. But I think I see other aspects translating right away. Kind of where do you see it clicks right away for him? And what areas do you think that he's going to take some time?
Yeah, I think transition, first of all, is where he's a killer. He has kind of similarly to Ben Simmons in a way that he'll go get a rebound, and when he ignites a break, whether it's off the bounce or moving it ahead quickly, like there's just an electricity that's generated within the gym that you can really feel. And it's not even these like ridiculous one-handed bounce passes through traffic. Like what's so special about Lonzo is just how he makes the simple play, but the timing of it is so impeccable, and he passes guys open He's a ball mover. He's not a ball stopper, which is what I really like about him. So I think playing up tempo, playing in transition, moving the ball constantly, like not pounding it. I think that's really going to become infectious right away. But again, like you said, I certainly have some questions about him being able to score in the half court. I think that's going to be an issue for him early on and potentially throughout his career. And that goes along with playing out of ball screens. Like you said, it's just not something he has a ton of high-level experience in. Like, he's not a guy who's going to get a side pick and roll and, like, snake the ball screen, get to a mid-range spot, keep the defender on his back and either, like, drop in a floater, a pull-up, or a lob. You know, that's just, like, not his style of play. So that's why I've always thought that it's going to be really beneficial for him, you know, to have kind of a secondary ball handler tight next to him, a guy who's good in pick and roll, who can make shots off the dribble. And that's why I like his fit with D'Angelo, although neither of them are really like break you down, get to the rim guys. I think that might become apparent at times. I like that you have multiple ball handlers in the backcourt.
Yeah, one of the things that is interesting to me about Ball as a prospect is that I'm having a hard time judging him within the context of, is he not doing things because he's not good at them? And should we be blaming him for not doing them? Right? So you were talking, and Pete brought up the point about like pick and roll, and then you brought up the idea of him not really being this guy who's going to snake and put guys in jail and get into the mid-range and sort of hit these mid-range jumpers. But he complements his game in enough ways with making sort of early reads within possessions, and those things impress me. Should we be? So how do you balance that when you're watching him and you're doing evaluations? Do you credit him for sort of staying away from the things that he doesn't do well, or do you sort of mark him with demerits for not being able to do some of these things?
Yeah, I think there are times you could see, you know, it hurt them. Like in the Kentucky game when De'Aaron went off, you know, I thought, okay, you're like, all right, I mean, I'd like to see you handle ball pressure better. I'd like to see you be able to create something out of pick and roll. So, I mean, I think you do have to, you know, you can't just give him a free pass for some of those areas where he needs to improve. But at the same time, I like that he continues to play the right way. He doesn't force things. He doesn't try to be somebody he's not. Sure, he'll jack up a step back 30-footer somewhat early in the clock every once in a while here and there. But it's hard to kill a guy for that when he plays the way he does. So, like, overall, I think as long as he has another guy next to him that's comfortable in those situations, which is really what the NBA is morphing toward anyway, in kind of these multiple 2, sometimes 3 guard attacks. I don't think he's going to have a major issue. It's just in terms of being like a lead guard who's like your go get me a bucket type of guy. Like, that's why I really like Fultz. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's why I think Fultz is in a class of his own. Is okay. My question with Lonzo is always like last 2 minutes, fourth quarter, you know, Western Conference Finals playoff game, like go get me a bucket, go make something happen when the court is shrunk and you're not in transition. I'm not sure he's ever going to be that guy. Sure.
And then I'm curious, how essential do you think it is for him to have shooters around him? That was something at UCLA, whether it was a lob guy in Anabogu, or guys like Leaf, guys like Thomas Welsh could pick and pop into that mid-range area. Is that something the Lakers, the construct of the roster is not like that at all? You got your Mozgov, Randall showed flashes of that at the end of the year. Nance, might have some capability, but there's very little front court shooting. Do you think that is, I mean, that's detrimental to any guard, but do you think it's detrimental especially to Lonzo?
Yeah, I do. I think the fact that he has such deep range will help him a little bit in terms of like playing out of ball screens. But the fact that he's not an elite off the dribble shooter And when that screener is most likely going to be a diver and not a pop guy, I think that hurts you a little bit when you're in the half court. So yeah, to me, he's definitely a guy who you want to, surround with shooters. You want to have an open floor. I think that's what made, in a lot of ways is a big reason why TJ Leaf is going to be a first-round pick this year. I think when he's surrounded by guys like that, he's definitely at his best. So I think with him, it would be interesting to toy around with some different lineups, with maybe Ingram at the 4, playing smaller. But what I really like about, his fit with them, aside from the shooting, is like if you play a lineup with, him, D'Angelo, Ingram, and then even like Julius, that's 4 guys right there who can handle and pass.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So I think that is going to, hide some of those shooting deficiencies if it becomes infectious like it was at UCLA. Like, he got guys at UCLA who, in the years prior, like were not maybe the most unselfish guys or quick decision makers. like the ball was humming. So I think that's going to help things a little bit.
For sure. And now I have kind of a crazy theory, Mike. This is something you were one of the louder voices, and you brought this up in your answer right there, to which I concurred, is that Brandon Ingram's eventual position is going to be at the 4th spot in the NBA, which I think most people would consider him a 3, but I strongly agree with you on that. I think that, if you look at Lonzo, he's got, some difficulties in the pick and roll, doesn't have a ton of shake, doesn't have a lot of advanced, side to side, ball handling moves. Mm-hmm. He's good at coming off of screens. I think defensively, he's better defending bigger positions. He's a good catch and shoot guy. He's a good cutter. Is Lonzo Ball a shooting guard that just gets a lot of assists?
I don't know. What is it, a point guard, a shoot? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
In today's age, it's like, is it the guy who brings up the ball? Is it the I think he's just like a complete basketball player. And in some ways, like we talked about, if he's not the guy late clock, creating out of pick and roll, maybe he is more of an off-ball guy. And I don't think it's crazy. I don't think that theory is crazy at all because, like you said, like he's a better spot shooter than he is a pull-up shooter. He's a tremendous cutter. He's a ball mover. You know what I mean? He's not like, all right, let me put you in a ball screen and shake you up and twist you up. And he doesn't have all that. He doesn't have the Kyrie Irving. He doesn't have that type of game. So I don't know. To me, he's just a basketball player. And the way he feels the game and can manage the game, that's what I like about him on the ball, is because this guy, he doesn't say much on the floor. He's not this huge personality, but he's a killer, man. Like, he is a killer. Like, he has a feel for how things are going. He has a feel for, okay, like we just got punched in the mouth. Sometimes it takes him a little bit to get revved up, get going. But like when UCLA was on its back and they needed something, like, bam, 30-foot step back. Like he's not afraid and he's calm and he's poised. And for maybe some of his flaws as a ball handler, he's not a guy who gets ripped all that often. So I don't know. He's a basketball player is the short answer, but all those qualities about him and his ability to think the game and manage the game, I think you have to call him a point guard as well.
Some of the things that intrigue me most about Ball, especially when sort of hypothesizing about him sharing a backcourt with D'Angelo Russell, is that one of the things that Russell is really good at is making the skip pass out of the pick and roll. When he was playing with Nick Young or even Lou Williams or Brandon Ingram, a lot of those guys got spot-up options because of Russell's ability to sort of see over the top and pass to the wings out of the pick and roll when sort of weak side defenders tag the big men who are cutting. And one of the things that I appreciate about Ball is his ability to sort of not only hit that spot-up jumper, but to attack closeouts. And I'm wondering if you see him being able to do that at the next level, and whether or not you envision that being a key part of his game, especially his rookie season.
I think absolutely. Especially when he's playing, if he's playing with a guy like D'Angelo, like you said, who's very good at, kind of pitching it back or hitting the, the wing circling up. He's so instinctual, and he's such a quick decision maker. He sees things a play or two ahead. So I think that's going to be really, really valuable for him, just to be able to make quick decisions, to be able to attack on the catch, read the floor. But like we talked about earlier, I think it's going to be really important that the floor is spaced and kind of open things up for when he is able to attack the closeout. He has long strides to the rim. He's better in space than he is like with a guy riding his hip. He's pretty narrow. He gets bumped off his spots on his way to the rim at times. But when he's able to attack, scrambling defenses like that, I think he's really dangerous. So the shooting aspect, again, I think is going to be really important in terms of the construct of the roster.
Mike, let's switch over to the defensive end of the court. What's your overall view of Lonzo on the defensive end, and do you think him and Russell are compatible on that end of the court?
I think it's going to be, a little bit of a challenge initially. He's not, I think D'Angelo's developed fairly nicely in terms of his physical makeup, in that he has some strength to him. Lonzo is not a physical guy at all. He's just not. He's he dies on screens. He's not gonna like slide full body in front of you and keep you in front. I think he has quick feet, good length, really good instincts, and he had some really nice moments against bigger players like Dylan Brooks. He had a couple games where late game they threw him on him, and he got some big stops. But I think that's more so due to his positional length and his timing and his instincts. So to me, he's never going to be like, he's not a lockdown guy, but he's not this, negative on the defensive end at all to me. I think he has a little bit of too cool for school demeanor to him overall, but like as an off-ball defender, his anticipation, his instincts are tremendous. I think among guards is some of the best in the draft. So I think that's where he's going to be valuable also, is off the ball, because he is really rangy. He is really instinctual. But in terms of being like a lock you up type of guy, that's not really who he is.
Yeah, he was pretty good on closeouts as well, which speaks to what you're saying about operating off of the ball. I think he was in the 91st percentile, on the defensive end per the synergy data. So, I definitely foresee him, rather than being a point of the attack guy, a guy that can jump passing lanes and use those instincts rather than have to. When he's defending ball screens, one thing that drives me crazy about him is he will lay on top of the ball screen, as opposed to trying to fight over it or underneath it. He, kind of wants to get screened. And I see that same too cool for school, element to him. So let's, move on to perhaps someone that's a bit more of a robust defensive prospect in Josh Jackson. But let's start on the offensive side of the ball with Jackson. What do you see, Mike? Is he the type of guy? He's someone who, he's a guy where a lot of us go, man, if he could only shoot, right, then it changes the, what he could be. But there are a lot of guys throughout NBA history that you were able to say that about their entire career. That being said, he did change his mechanics a bit, and he did improve over the course of the second half of the year. So I guess let's start with that, Mike, is how do you feel about the translatability of his jump shot, and how much how viable is the improvement that he made in the second half of the year?
Yeah, I'll be honest, he shot it a lot better than I anticipated. I think people want to, and while I think, the free throw line is really indicative, obviously it has a long history of showing maybe some flaws in the sample size of a college 3-point percentage, but to me, he's going to make shots. He's always made shots. Like he's a really streaky guy, because that's just kind of who he is. Like he's He's not the most disciplined guy on either end of the floor. He's a highly emotional, intense player. He's just kind of a sped up guy in general. And I think a lot of times that you see that in streaky shooters. You see that in guys who are really good defenders, are generally oftentimes streaky shooters as well, because they have this level of anxiety and just rapid movement. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I think he's always going to be a streaky guy, and then you look at the mechanics. But he's always made shots, like at every level through high school. But he's an interesting shot maker because he doesn't make open shots. Like he's a tough shot maker. He was so much better off the bounce actually in high school than he was off the catch. And I think a lot of that is because he's one of these guys who really needs to get like upward momentum into a shot. He doesn't shoot a really easy ball, and he needs to get that bounce, get to the peak of his jump, and then let it go. So I think when you back him up to the NBA 3-point line and he's set kind of like more at a standstill, I think he's really going to struggle initially. I think that's part of the reason why he struggles at the free throw line as well, is just because he's not able to. He's not jumping. He's not able to get his leg. He's not on the move, and I think that's when he's most comfortable. So I think he's going to have some issues, but to me, he's a guy who's going to make shots. He's not a non-shooter. He's just a really erratic shooter.
One thing I was, watching your strengths and weaknesses videos on him just earlier this afternoon, and he was at 1.3 points per possession on uncontested shots, and I think that's something that do you think he'll be able to translate that on the he's not going to be a guy that you're running off of pin downs and front turning into his into a 25-footer, but do you think that he'll be able to knock down those open threes from the 24-foot 3-point line the way that he did in college, or do you think that that lack of having momentum? Do you think that the kind of how hot and how fast his the ball comes out for him, do you think that extra distance is going to be impacted by that?
Yeah, I think it's going to hurt him a little bit. I think he's a guy who, like, if you're in transition and he's filling a lane and is able to step into it, I think he's going to make shots that way. I think just when he's like fully at a standstill, he's going to have a little bit of trouble when you back him up, when you're talking about above the arc or above the break. But I do like his potential, though, at a pick and roll. I think he's a guy who is going to be able to create some space, kind of get to his spots and make pull-ups, which I think bodes really well for his game, just because he's a guy who can handle a little bit. He can play out of a ball screen, and he's a tremendous passer. So I think that gives him a little bit more like go-to type of potential, in that he can play out of a ball screen and he can shoot it a little bit off the dribble as well. So again, I think he'll struggle a little bit when you back him up, but I don't think it's, he's ever going to be like a total non-shooter.
So one thing I wanted to talk about regarding Jackson is sort of similar to the discussion that we just had about Ball and his ability to sort of play next to D'Angelo Russell in a backcourt situation. And so Jackson's basically projected as a small forward, which basically lines him up, in direct competition with Brandon Ingram for minutes should the Lakers draft him at number 2. Do you see Jackson being able to play next to Ingram with either like on the wing, so either at shooting guard or small forward, with whoever running point guard? Is his game versatile enough right now? So you talked about his passing ability and his ability to handle the ball some, and some individual shot creation potentially, like as a shooter off of the dribble. Can he play some shooting guard in certain lineups, or is Ingram going to have to fill that role so that Jackson would play more of his natural position at small forward? How do you project him there? Yeah,
I think he could play with all those guys. just because one, he can guard it two. I think he can guard 1 through 3 at the NBA level. And then you have another guy who can play out of a ball screen. So you have Russell who can play out of a ball screen, Jackson who can play out of a ball screen, and Ingram who can play out of a ball screen. I think the biggest thing is going to be the spot shooting aspect when a guy like D'Angelo is on the ball, because then you have Josh, who people are able to sag off of a little bit, and then Brandon. I mean, that's going to be, I think, a key for the Lakers moving forward, is, how good of a shooter he turns into, off the catch from NBA 3. So I think you have maybe some issues there with spacing when Russell's on the ball, and you have Jackson and Ingram both spacing. But in terms of playing some 2, I think he can play. I think he can play the 2 or the 3. I think he's a lot more capable at that than some of the other wings or kind of combo forwards in this draft.
So, and a follow-up to that, do you ever envision him being able to slide up in smaller lineups? Or because even though he's a plus athlete, he doesn't have that sort of Brandon Ingram like length or so, and even though he's got some good size, he's not necessarily one of those like barrel-chested sort of like Carmelo Anthony types where he's got this natural sort of bigger frame to him. Do you ever see him playing like or developing into like a 3-4, or is he more of a pure wing?
Yeah, I think he's more of a 2-3 than a 3-4. Like you said, he's pretty wiry framed. I don't think he's ever going to be a big body. Doesn't have great length. Solid positionally for a 2-3, but not really for a 3-4. Whereas I envision a guy like Jason Tatum, I think he's going to fill out nicely. I think he's got, more length, the better reach. I think he's more suitable to be kind of a 3-4, and his game follows suit with that. But I think that's okay for Josh because he can play, a fair amount of 2. I think he can play some 1 in stretches. Just because he can really pass. I think that's the thing with Josh is he's a tremendous passer. He can be a little bit wild. He can be a little bit turnover prone. But to me, like he in a pinch can guard 1 through 3, can play 1 through 3 for stretches offensively. So yeah, he's just versatility is the word with him on both ends of the floor. I think the question is, like, what is his ceiling? What is he elite at? Because to me, like, his floor is a really good role starter type on a winning team.
Yes.
But is he ever more than that? I think that's going to depend on his shooting.
How does this is an unusual draft for me in that I have the same top 3 in the same order that you guys do over at Draft Express, with Fultz at 1, Ball at 2, and Jackson at 3. And it's an unusual draft because I have a hard time envisioning either Lonzo or Jackson being a top 2 scorer on a good team, which is unusual for, those slots in the draft. Even if guys don't work out, you can kind of project them that way. I don't even really project them in that sense. Very simple question, I guess, is how does Josh Jackson score in the NBA?
Yeah, I think that is a good question. I think he's going to score. I think he's going to score more. Well, he's going to score off of cuts. He's going to score off offensive rebounds. He's going to do all that, all those little things. Transition runouts. He's really good in transition. He has good body control, so he can grab a rebound, go coast to coast. So he's going to give you all that little stuff. I think he's going to be better. I think he's going to have more of a chance to score as a guy who's playing on the ball, like as a guy who's playing out of a ball screen, than he is as like a pure catch and shoot playoff closeouts wing, just because I don't quite buy his NBA range off the catch yet. But I think he's a good enough ball handler. He's athletic enough, and he's a good enough off the dribble shooter to at least keep you honest there, and then find ways to get to the rim, use his stride length and his agility, I think, to slice through defenses, to slash kind of in that fashion rather than, being strictly an off-ball guy. So That is the question with him. I think his floor is kind of like people have said kind of like an Andre Iguodala type, in that a slashing type who can really, really pass and who's never going to be like a great spot shooter. So to me, that's kind of worst case. That's what Josh is going to be in my.
Do you think he's that caliber of defender? Iguodala level?
I don't think he's quite as long, and I don't think while fairly similar in weight, I don't think has as big of a frame as well. I think, Josh wasn't – I think he was a good defender this year. I don't think he was a great defender this year. A lot of that is due to, like we talked about earlier, just his nature. He's not the most disciplined guy. He likes to roam. He likes to gamble. I think he got, lost a little bit at times defensively. He's really active. He can go make a play, no doubt about it. But I think he's going to need to, stay fully locked in because he doesn't quite have the frame and the length to be like a complete stopper type of like a big three. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when it comes to his defense, I'm actually most interested in whether or not he can sort of blend the IQ that he clearly possesses for the game and the motor that he can play with that sort of level of discipline that is needed at the NBA level. And this is where it's always hard, right? Like you do this for a living, but like we're projecting this on to like 19 and 20-year-olds and like what they're going to be when they're 25, 26, and 27 years old. And I just don't have good answers for that. I think if anybody did, then they'd probably make a lot of money or more money than us, right?
I think
Go ahead.
I think the thing with Josh is, we talk about all this. Can he do this? Can he do that? What's his frame? What's his length? He is tough as nails, and he is an ultimate competitor. And I think he's going to do everything to maximize his potential. He's just a killer, man. Like he is a killer. He played a huge role on that Kansas team that was one of the better teams in the country for the most of the year. He's not afraid at all. If you're in a scrum on the court, he's the first guy in the middle of it. He's a guy that maybe he's going to be an acquired taste to some, but he's a guy that you're going to want to go to war with on both ends of the floor. And I think in terms of like sheer toughness, I think he's far and away the toughest player in the draft.
Can I go back to something really quickly before we move on?
Go for it, man.
We were talking a minute ago about like how he's going to score in the NBA. Do you ever envision him being able to like be a post-up threat at all, either at small forward playing against more like-sized players, or especially at shooting guard, or like if he does sort of moonlight at point guard, whether or not he can be effective enough down there to sort of open up his passing ability while also being sort of a bucket getter, like 15, 12 feet in.
I think I like him in more of like a mid-post face situation. He's not going to like fight for deep position and hit you with like a quick shimmy and jump hook. That's just not. He kind of has like an awkward. His game overall is like somewhat awkward. You see how he brings the ball up really awkwardly on his pull up, and he's just got kind of a unorthodox game in some ways. So I wouldn't count on him being like a post punisher versus smaller guys like that. But I think we saw, in that Michigan State game against Miles Bridges, I don't know if you guys watched that one, but he had a couple possessions there where against Bridges, who was a big dude, where I think when he, was able to face him up and create space with step backs, going right, going left, I think because he's so quick twitch, he can be a factor there. But in terms of being like a bury you or like jump hook finisher, up and under type of guy, he doesn't really have that. But a mid-post guy versus a smaller, two, I think he could have a little value there.
All right, so let's let's move on to this drafting this guy is the one scenario that I think I'd be upset with. And I know that makes me a spoiled Laker fan because a week ago, we just found out if we were going to have the pick or not. But De'Aaron Fox, man, I'm just a couple days away from wrapping up my video on him, and he's probably the guy that I disagree with you gentlemen over at Draft Express on the most. And I was watching your strength and weaknesses video on him today too, Mike. And, on the title card at the beginning, you have his weaknesses is his shooting stroke, his point guard polish, and his defensive consistency. And I'm like, damn, man, what else is there? So I'm really low on Fox. And I think that he's the one guy that I'm concerned with. Mike, can you talk me into, at least to some degree, what's the case for De'Aaron Fox?
Yeah. I think I love De'Aaron. We've had the chance to sit down with him a couple times and get to know him since he was, 15, 16 years old. And he, first and foremost, like, this kid is a basketball junkie, and he's an awesome kid, big time worker. So all the intangible stuff is going to be there with him. In terms of first of all, the defensive consistency stuff, he definitely had some lapses this year, and he wasn't. But that's really, like, I should say that's really based on kind of what he was coming out of high school. Like, he was a stopper, like some of the quickest hands. And so the BAM guys, I don't know, you guys are familiar with BAM. They do like a lot of the athletic testing, and they have crazy analytics. And I remember when he was in high school, they told us that he had the quickest reaction time. They can do this like reaction time testing, basically Twitch reaction time of any player in their database, and they have years and years of NBA, analysis, their data for that. So like, he was a monster defensively. So I think he had his times this year at Kentucky where he was picking up full court. He got into Lonzo's junk quite a bit in their meetings. So I think defensively he's going to be a plus. Maybe he's not going to guard your twos, your traditional twos. He's maybe a one position guy because of his frame, but I think he's going to be a heat you up, get into your stuff kind of guy there. And the shooting is definitely the question. Obviously didn't shoot it great this year. But I do think that he could potentially have like a Mike Conley like progression there. Like, I think he's going to be really good from the elbows. I don't think he's going to be an issue there. It's just the NBA 3 is obviously going to be a transition for him. So in terms of the point guard stuff, he's a smart enough kid who studies the game, and he's going to live in the paint. So I think he's going to figure that out. Like, it's not like he's not a point guard. He gets a little bit wild at times. Doesn't have every pick and roll read down perfectly. But to me, he's easily the quickest player in the draft. He's going to live in the paint. Even with defenses going under, I think he's still going to find a way to have an impact there, and he's going to be a plus defender. So I think he has a lot of upside. It all comes down to the jump shot, which is kind of not exactly words to live by in today's NBA.
Right.
But I think I have more hope than most for him there.
Interesting. Yeah, for me, one of my big concerns is that from watching him on tape over the last couple of weeks has been there are a lot of shots that he just doesn't take. It's not just a matter that he has form issues. There, like he is, he passed up a lot of spot up opportunities, to the detriment of his team. I thought he was fantastic at attacking bigs off of pick and rolls when they'd soft hedge, hang back in the paint. And he was really great at, jumping into their body. And I think Fox is great in space on both ends of the court. I thought his hands were fantastic, as you pointed out. It doesn't surprise me that he tested out so well in that respect. I think that when I don't really love his technique on pick and rolls and on pick and roll defense, but that can be, that can be taught. But I think it's a combination of his quickness, his instincts, and even his frame. I don't think people realize how small he is. He's about $170. And that's small even for his age. but if you put him out in space, yeah, he's a guy that can pick up 94 feet like a Beverly. But I don't know, man. I just have a hard time with. I feel like in today's NBA, if you're not going to be a competent shooter, you need to have like elite court vision. He's got the athleticism of a, I don't know if he's on the John Wall level of things, maybe a notch below, but he's definitely a very, plus athlete. But he's a good passer, but I just don't see the shots that he creates on the NBA level. Are you seeing something different, Mike?
No. I think he's still. I mean, he was really like more of a combo for a lot of his high school career. He's guys with his quickness and twitch and ability to live in the paint, like the high school level, you don't need to have these advanced reads. Like he never really had to have that. So I think I really buy into who he is as a kid more than anything. And I think that's where we have the benefit of being able to get to know these guys and get intel and figure out who they are and what makes them tick. And so I think we're really lucky to have that and just have gotten to know him at a young age. So I just believe in his intelligence as a kid. I believe in his work ethic. And I think that stuff is going to come. I think he's a basketball junkie. I think he's going to study the game. So it's going to have to be a situation where the floor is spread for him and he has shooters around for him to have an impact, initially. Because, I mean, if he doesn't have a stretch 4 with him setting that screen or even a stretch 5, like that's not really going anywhere. Yeah. So I think he's going to need it. It's going to be a process for him. But with that said, he's going to really defend. Yeah, he's going to play with energy defensively. He's going to push in transition. He's going to be an athlete. Like, he's going to have a role off the bench initially until he continues to gain experience, learn the game even more. And another thing I really like about him is, like, he's thin, but he goes at dudes like around the rim. Like, he shot almost 8 free throws per 40 minutes. As a guy who weighs $170, I really like that about him as well. So I think there's a level of fearlessness there. There's a level of big game play there. That 39 spot that he put on UCLA. I don't know. The shooting is a question for sure. The frame isn't ideal. He needs to learn the point guard position a little better. But I think there's a lot of upside with him. And again, I think he's going to turn into a good enough shooter in time. I think he's going to be, like I said, I think he's going to be really good from the elbows. And I think down the road, he's going to punish you at least at like a 35% clip when guys go under down the road.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because we were talking about Jackson's free throw percentage and even Lonzo's free throw percentage, which we didn't bring up. He was a mid-60s free throw shooter, and you just mentioned that Fox was basically a per 40 minutes taking 8 free throws a game, and he was shooting those at 76%, right? And so in theory, the area of shooting that most people rely on as sort of a precursor to success at the pro level, he actually shows the most chops. It's just that, in these other areas where he's shooting off of the dribble or maybe the inconsistency with his form, that it's actually not translating yet in the other aspects of this game. And that's why I can see where you're coming from in terms of, just the work ethic and being a gym rat and sort of that student of the game idea, that you believe that it will come. So I could see that as well.
Yeah, it's funny. We made it through that whole Lonzo thing without once talking about his shooting form. I like that.
Yeah.
That's
I had notes on it, man, but I was just like, I don't know. I guess we could revisit that. But
no. I mean, like, it's
the
almost
most over-talked about thing in the draft.
Yeah,
really.
That's what I'm saying. It's overplayed. So I'm saying kudos to us.
Hey, good job ourselves. All right. Yes. So I'm asking you straight out, Mike. Why do you have De'Aaron Fox ahead of Dennis Smith Jr.?
Because of a lot of the things we mentioned earlier in terms of the mentality. Dennis.
Interesting.
Dennis has not always been a guy who brings it defensively. He hasn't done like made winning plays consistently. I mean, the situation was not great at NC State, that's for sure. But he has some questions to answer about how much, he cares about winning games versus getting stats. That's definitely an aspect that, I think scouts are taking into account with him. Sure, he's a guy who's going to put up big numbers and score at all three levels on somewhat of a losing team. Hopefully for him that'll change, and I hope he lands in a really good spot, because I don't think Dennis is a bad kid by any means. I think he's a good kid and he wants to be good. It's just there are some things he does. One, defensively, his effort this year was close to horrendous, I thought. But offensively, there are just some things where like he pounds it or he kills his dribble. Like he doesn't. What Lonzo is always making the right play. Lonzo is always moving the ball. Dennis just kind of plays a selfish brand in some ways. And I'm interested to see, especially we have him going to New York right now.
No, so that would not be a good fit.
Yeah. Listen, like he's one of the most talented guards in this draft.
Yeah.
And he might, him slipping and going to maybe a better organization might benefit him long term, and we might look back in a few years and say, God, like why did we nitpick this kid? Sure. But there are some questions there in terms of the mentality with him.
How much do you normally put into that, Mike, when you're scouting a kid and, in the position you're in, you have access to talk to these guys? And also, I don't think people realize you're talking to them from a very young age. So you, in some ways, get to know them over the course of time. And I know it's difficult, not necessarily put a percentage on it, but just in your evaluation process, you've brought up mentality a couple of times. So I'm inclined to think that you put a great deal of emphasis on that. Is that the case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's huge, and it's become so much more important in scouting in today's NBA. I mean, almost all these teams have a sports psych guy or department. There's so much intel floating around, and a lot of scouts are on staff. Guys are starting to bring in like old school coaches just who know everybody and who can get intel really easily. What makes these guys tick is what's so important, man. Like, because you get to a certain level, to me, like all these guys can play to a certain degree. I mean, there's a reason why they're talked about as prospects. And it's really like what makes them tick, to me, is what's going to make them from being like an NBA player, period, to a really good NBA player or an all-star. Like, to me, it's the mental aspect that kind of gives you that jump. So I like even like, for instance, like Thon Maker, right? Like he's a guy who we probably weren't as high on as we should have been, because, at the high school level, we saw these flaws. Oh, he's not the most physical guy. Oh, he has shaky hands. He's not that disciplined. He's too sped up. He doesn't have a great feel. But Thon Maker is like one of the best guys, workers, and has the most self-belief of like any young player in the NBA.
Really?
And I think all that stuff is going to, combined with the fact that he moves well, he's 7'1", he's going to do everything in his power to maximize his potential. So to me, that stuff is super important.
I actually just wanted to get back, and one last question about Fox. Like, I know we've moved way on from him, but I want to get back to it, because we talked about, basically the same question that we had about Ball with Russell and Jackson with Ingram. Could you see a viable backcourt pairing with Russell and Fox, based off of the way that Fox plays now?
I think you could, in that D'Angelo can spot shoot, and D'Angelo is a better shooter in general. I think if your 3 and your 4 were shooters as well, then it would totally fit. I think it has to do with the rest of them. But in terms of him and D'Angelo, I think that could be a fit just because he does give you a little bit of what D'Angelo doesn't, in that he's almost polar opposite in that he's so quick off the bounce. He can really carve up bigs and pick and roll. So I think that could work in some ways, and that they could play off of each other, because D'Angelo is probably a more advanced, is definitely a more advanced passer, is kind of a more old school, slow, savvy floaters, pull-ups, than De'Aaron. So I think he gives them kind of a lightning element next to a skill guy in D'Angelo. But you need shooting elsewhere. You need shooting elsewhere with De'Aaron. Like you can't have more than one other non-shooter really on the floor if he's going to be your guy, at least early on in his career.
Yeah, and that's something that the Lakers definitely lack. They have, really at just about every position they're lacking in terms of shooting. Oh, that being said, I don't know how wise it is to draft a guy at 19 based on your current roster. If you really like a guy like Fox, you take him, and then the other guys are the ones that are probably shown the door eventually. So, but before we move on to the 28th pick, Mike, this is something Darius brought up before the show that I thought was interesting, that I wanted to get to before we did that. So, Lakers had the number two pick in the previous two drafts, taking Russell and Ingram. Kind of knowing what you know now, we talked about three guys today in Lonzo, Jackson, and Fox. Let's toss Fultz in there as well. And then the two Laker guys, so 6 guys in total. Kind of how would you rank those 6 between the 4 guys this year and the 2 Lakers that they've taken the last couple of years?
Okay, so all right, say that again. So we're talking Ball, Fultz, Jackson, Fox, and then Ingram and Russell. Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I would rank. Okay, I would go Fultz. I would go Ball, but I'm very close to going Ingram there. I'm really high on Ingram, man. Like, I know he had a down year. In a lot of respects,
to the choir. You're to the choir with Ingram.
I think his upside is through the roof. I think he's going to figure it out as a shooter, and I think he has a higher upside than Lonzo. But I would go Fultz, Ball, Ingram, Jackson, Fox, Russell.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What are your thoughts on D'Angelo? Obviously, you're not as a.
I mean, I also really like Fox, so it's not to totally kill D'Angelo. I don't know, man. Like, just the laissez-faire style sometimes for me is tough. I think he's really, really talented. I don't know, man. It's like sometimes I question how much other guys enjoy playing with him. I don't know. I wish he gave you more defensively. I wish he was able to put more pressure on the rim, but again, like, he's a super talented guy who can go get you 40, as you saw. He can shoot it. He has size. He can pass. I think he's a talented guy. I just the whole lack of defense and not the highest motor coupled with the average athleticism for me is a bit of a turnoff. But again, I think he's a really skilled ball screen player who can shoot off the catch and play some two. And he's still so young. So I think he's going to be a really, really good NBA player. I prefer those other guys.
What do you think, Darius?
That's interesting. So I would definitely go Fultz, and then I was going to have Ingram. And then I was going to go Russell and then Ball. But listening to you talk about Ball has sort of given me a little bit more to chew on with him. I'm not down on him at all. I'm wondering how much of the culture changer stuff is real at the NBA level versus at like the high school and college level. I think that if he did go to the Lakers, for example, that's actually a more natural fit in terms of culture, because a lot of the stuff that he does well in terms of being a ball mover and unselfish and playing the right way, that's perfect alignment with what Luke Walton wants. But some of the things that he doesn't do well are NBA level things. that you really want from a lead guard, and those are things that Russell does do well at this stage. Especially just all the in between stuff, right? Like we can talk about 24 feet and out, and we can talk about 6 and 8 feet and in, and like the cutting and all of that. But Russell's a really good cutter as well. And so I just think that Russell's, even if he doesn't have the same court vision and next level feel that Ball has, he has good enough feel, and he's a really good passer himself, and he's got a more complete offensive game. And I think that his defense, while lackadaisical at times, and especially at the point of attack, how small quick guards can give him problems, that he's not really as bad as what his reputation is. But then I would go Ball like right after him, and it's really close. And then I would go Jackson and then Fox. Fox's shooting just concerns me enough, and at his size and frame, I see him as, just like you said, like a one-position player only. And even though the league is going in a direction where you can put more of those players on the court at the same time, I just at the pro level, at least early on, I wonder how his quickness and shiftiness translates when teams are going under on every single screen, and bigs basically lay off of him and are better at sort of managing angles, and especially when more teams are going small and more teams are playing, essentially power forwards at center and sliding up threes to play to play power forward, that the quickness at multiple positions now is going up, especially at the bigs level. That's kind of where my concern is with Fox. It's like the things you said about like his character and his work ethic. Those are things that I certainly appreciate, and like they add to the equation things that we didn't know or that aren't often discussed enough about prospects, I think. But that would kind of be where I was at with those guys. So.
For sure,
though, right? They're all like we're literally talking about guys who are all 21 and under, and Russell just turned 21 in February. Like these guys are nowhere near their primes yet, and so it'll be interesting to see kind of where they all are as a group 4 or 5 years from now.
Yeah, it's interesting the extent to which reasonable minds can disagree, and which I love. But for me, my top 6 of those would be Fultz at 1. I'd have Russell 2nd, Lonzo 3rd, Jackson 4th, Ingram 5th, with Fox a very, very distant 6th. So yeah, it's and we're gonna get into Ingram later, Mike. I'm curious about your thoughts on him. I know you've been an advocate of him for quite some time, but let's move over to the 28th pick. And I think the way we can do this is there are so many guys that we we could talk about 25 guys as opposed to the 3 that were available at number 2. So rather than doing that, let's do this. What are your overall view, what are the guys you like at that point in the draft? I know you just got back from a scouting trip. You were we were in Turkey the other day when we were talking. I'm curious if there are any draft and stash prospects, and then after you give your general overview on what you think of that part of the draft, I'm gonna just we'll do a lightning round. I'll give you some names, and then you can give us some quick thoughts on those guys.
Yeah, I think there's some real value actually at 28 this year. There's some talent to be had for sure. There's one guy I really like who I think could be available in that range is Shemi Ojale from SMU. I think he really fits kind of where the NBA is trending. And he helps the Lakers in that he can shoot the ball. He's an interesting body. I mean, he's like 240 pounds, 4% body fat or something insane. So he's kind of like a bulky guy, but he's really only about 6'7". But I think he's kind of a Jay Crowder type of guy in terms of his physical attributes, although he's a little bit bulkier and a little bit more robotic. But I really like him because he has tremendous feet. I think he can guard threes. I think he can guard fours. I think he can even play some like super small ball 5 at times for a coach who maybe wants to get a little bit creative. And I really like his stroke. And he's, comfortable in that mid-post area. He has good footwork. He can create space. He averaged 19 points a game for SMU. He was far and away their best player. So he's going to be able to step in right away and have an impact. Really intense competitor. Again, one of these kind of, I hate to harp on it again, but one of these kind of super guys in terms of his personality makeup. His approach to the game, all those things. I think he's going to be a guy who's probably going to go either late first or early second round and be a guy where we look back in a couple of years and say, okay, like he was a top 20, 25 type of guy. So he's one I really like. I think another guy who could make some sense is DJ Wilson from Michigan. Just more as like, he has some flaws in that he's not the toughest guy, not a great defensive rebounder. He's not physical, even though he has a good frame. But it's just the kid is 6'10", 240 with a 7'3" wingspan and shoots threes and moves like a wing. He's just a guy where I think you take a chance on him and hope that you can, as he gains more experience, he gets a little bit tougher because he was a late bloomer. He was really like a 6'7" spot-up shooting wing in high school. He kind of grew late and got the body late. So I think he's another guy. I'm not completely sold he's going to, maximize his potential, but he's an interesting upside play, I think, at 28. And then one last guy I really like overall is Derek White. He maybe doesn't fit what the Lakers are trying to do if they go guard at number 2, but really, really smooth, 6'5", can play on the ball, can play off the ball, shoots it, tremendous feel for the game. Was actually a D2 transfer, one of these late bloomers again, who was like 6 foot out of high school, and now he's 6'5", 100, 200 pounds. So he's another guy I think is gonna, we look back and say he should have been a first round pick.
Did you see anybody on your scouting trip that is a possible draft and stash type candidate?
So this last trip was more so, it was the EuroLeague Final Four. So it's a lot of guys who, it was kind of a funny crop actually, because you had like Jan Vesely, Patrick Young, Ekpe Udo, like all these guys. Yeah. Udo was a monster, by the way. Like he can play in the NBA. Yesterday if he wants to.
I was sad to see him leave the Warriors. Actually, Anyways, that's a different conversation. But
so it was more. And then we saw Luka Doncic. It was more so some older guys, but I think a guy who could make some sense at the 5 is Anzes Pasechniks. He's a Latvian big. 7'2". People are naturally going to make the Kristaps comparisons, but he's not that. He's 7'2" with some length. He can play above the rim. He can shoot it a little bit. I think he's a guy who kind of needs time and space and needs to develop there, but not the toughest guy, but moves really well at 7'2". Can guard pick and roll a little bit. Maybe probably not a switch guy, but he's agile enough. And he has some shooting potential. So I think he's another interesting guy there late in the first.
All right. So I got a list. All my friends were excited that you were coming on the show, Mike. And I like I said, I got 25 guys. So I'm going to get yelled at regardless of whomever I leave out. But I'm going to ask you about 5. Let's do a little lightning round of potential options at 28 and just give me your quick thoughts on what you think of them. Let's do Bam Adebayo.
Yeah. Bam. Physical specimen for sure. Long arms, 240 pounds, really bouncy in space, great feet. I think he could fit as like an offensive rebounder who can also switch ball screens. The thing with Bam is he kind of has the mentality that basically as a guy who was like more 6'9" growing up, he always thought, I need to be a 4. I need to be like a skill 4. He's even told us at times like, I can play some 3. And that's always been the thing with Bam is that like if he would just lock in on being like a monster offensive rebounder, a monster shot blocker, a monster rebounder in general, lob catcher, which I think he did a pretty nice job of overall at Kentucky. But he's just, I mean, he blocked like 1.5 shots per 40 with that length and that athleticism. He didn't really defensive rebound at a great rate. So I like his physical makeup and I like his capabilities. I just wonder if he's going to buy into what he's going to need to buy into to be the best NBA player he can be.
Yeah, like more tools than production.
Right. Yeah, and it's just he's kind of caught between being like a motor guy and a skill guy, and I think he kind of wants to be more. Which, to his credit, he has a little bit of a 15-foot face-up jumper. He's got a little bit of game. But at the NBA level, he's going to have to be like an energy athlete. So it just depends on if he's willing to be that or not. He kind of reminds me of like J.J. Hickson a little bit.
Huh. Interesting. All right. So let's talk about someone who would have been we would have been discussing at the top of the show, had some tragic injuries not hit him. Harry Giles.
Yeah, I think he's a really interesting play at 28. Obviously the knee, both knees, is kind of the biggest question with him. How is he going to do in the medical? But if all of that, if you really believe in your medical staff, and the red flags aren't all that red, I think he could be interesting in that he fits as a guy who can switch every ball screen. He's a vertical spacer in that he can catch pick and roll lobs. He's a good offensive rebounder, and he's more buying into his role, I think. Like, he's not trying to be this ultra skill guy. He's got huge hands, long arms, really mobile. So again, like, you may see him go 31 if the medical stuff isn't great, but as a guy who, when healthy, is probably a top 20 guy in this draft, I think he's definitely intriguing. And again, a big personality too, like a real jovial kid, who I think is going to be, a positive asset in any locker room.
All right, let's move on to a guy who just set a record, I believe, at the combine for the shuttle drill, Jordan Bell out of Oregon.
Love Jordan Bell, Long Beach kid.
Yep.
I could see the Lakers going Jordan Bell there. Actually, I think
Chino Hills. Where'd he go? Poly, was it?
I think so.
Yeah, Long Beach and Chino Hills, man, to the Lakers. That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, that would be really fitting. Jordan Bell is a really interesting player to me, especially just in the way that the NBA has developed. He has unbelievable feet, as you mentioned, with the shuttle time. I think he can guard fours, no problem. He's strong, but he's not like as physical as you would think in terms of defending like legitimate fives. But he's a tough kid overall. He's going to be able to switch every screen, and he can really pass. I think that's the thing that's going to help him a lot early on. Is he's a really underrated passer. Like, maybe he's not going to be much of a threat, from 17 feet on that, pocket pass on the short roll, but he can straight line drive it, and he can play off that. And I think that's something Luke Walton would really like as well, just in the way he wants to play. So he makes a lot of sense to me. Athlete, defends, improved IQ. I like Jordan Bell quite a bit.
All right, let's do a kid out of France, Jonathan Jean.
Yeah, I was just watching some of him today, actually. Still have to finish up his video. He's an intriguing long-term play for sure. I mean, he's 7'2", 207 pounds, so that kind of tells you, how far away he is from having a major impact in an NBA game. But I'm not to say that he's Rudy Gobert, but like, I remember when Rudy Gobert went to the combine. Granted, Rudy Gobert was almost 240 pounds at that age. Not at that age, but a year older at the combine. But I remember when he went to the combine and got destroyed in like the one-on-one post drills by Colton Iverson. And everyone's like, oh man, like, this kid's going late first. Like, he's stiff and he's got no core strength and all, guys just killed him. And I can see Jonathan John kind of outperforming expectations, getting stronger, using his agility to guard the perimeter. He can really run the floor. He's like silly putty, man. Like he's so raw, but can be shaped in a few different ways because he has a little bit of skill and he has crazy tools. So he's a ways away. But I don't know. I think he's a guy who in a couple of years, once he fills out, he's one of these guys who like doesn't. He's another like jovial kid who doesn't understand the moment. So like he went out to the combine in front of, you know, all these NBA scouts with all these accomplished college players and was just balling. Like wasn't scared, was just like guarding pick and roll, catching lobs, putting the ball on the floor a little bit, left hand, right hand, like just having fun. And I think that's going to serve him well moving forward.
That's great. And let's do one last guy, kind of a little bit off the wall here, but Jonah Bolden, former UCLA guy.
Yeah, Jonah Bolden is going to be an interesting one to watch pan out, I think. 6'10", you know, has length, can shoot it a little bit. Obviously had a great year with FMP. It's kind of hard for me to shake the taste of just kind of how he was at UCLA. You know, but that was obviously a while ago, but he had his issues there in terms of, you know, schoolwork and you know, consistent approach to the game and work ethic and things like that. But I mean, it's hard to find guys like him, especially with the way the league is trending. I don't know. Some of the stats in that league can be fool's gold at times because it's not a very athletic league. So a guy like him just really stands out and really pops on film. To me, he's a guy who could be intriguing in the 40s or 50s, but when you're talking 28, I think that'd be a little bit of a reach.
Good to know. That's great stuff, man. All right, let's wrap this bad boy up with kind of your thoughts on you gave your perspective on D'Angelo a bit earlier, but you're one of the bigger voices in favor of Brandon Ingram, and still are. Kind of what did you see out of his rookie year? Where do you think that ship is going?
Yeah, you know, obviously I didn't watch as much as you guys, but I try to tune in a fair amount. And, you know, the biggest thing for me that was alarming early on was just kind of the deer in the headlights look. You know, I think he lost confidence, especially in his shot early on. And, you know, you can break down the mechanics and all these different things, and rightfully so. But I think a lot of it was just confidence with his jump shot, and he, especially at the free throw line. I mean, he shot 68%, you know, at Duke from the line, but he's not a 62% free throw shooter. I mean, we have stats on him, you know, before, like we have high school stats on all these guys. In 2014, you know, for Adidas Gauntlet Circuit with Stackhouse Elite, he shot 83% from the line. You know, like he's not like historically a bad in 22 games. He's not like historically a bad free throw shooter. So I think a lot of the early struggles was just being overwhelmed. And I think you could have expected that a little bit, just given his like meteoric rise. Like he was not a huge recruit really until late in his high school career. He was a late bloomer in terms of his growth. He was a slow starter at Duke. So the slow start wasn't a huge shocker, but the kind of like running away when the lights were bright at times is the thing that, you know, was a little bit off-putting. But I thought toward the end of the year, man, like he really, really showed some things. He looked a lot more athletic, I thought, than he did at Duke. And I kind of projected that with him to some degree, just because a lot of times like these guys who are so lanky and late bloomers with high hips and like they just need to get some core strength underneath them. So I think that was a welcoming sign. I thought he played the game the right way. So I don't know. I mean, to me, he just has so much upside. Like we talk about age so much, but I mean, he's like at least 4 months younger than Josh Jackson still. Like you could call that a redshirt year for him. And like if you put him in this draft, like we talked about, I still think he'd be like a top 3 pick. So to me, just his versatility, his ability to play 1 through 4, his ability to play some small ball 4 in the future. I think he's going to shoot it better once, he has a full year under him. He gains more confidence. Like, to me, I think he has a chance to be a long-time All-Star. I really do.
Fantastic. All right, man. One last thing. You are Rob Pelinka. You're in his shoes. What is the ideal Laker draft at 2 and 28?
2 and 28. I draft Lonzo Ball, and then I draft Shemi Ojale at 28.
Very nice. Very nice. Darius, any parting thoughts or questions, my man?
No, I think that we've covered it all, and I just want to say you're preaching to the choir with Ingram. Pete knows where I'm at with Ingram.
Yeah, I'm sticking on that, man. I'm sticking with that. I believe in the kid.
Yeah, we got to bet, Mike, him and I. We got to, him going to a fancy restaurant on my dime if Ingram ever scores 22 points per game or more. So
ever, like in his career.
In his career, at any point, yes.
At any point.
Yes, it has to. We didn't make that. Has to be on the Lakers caveat. Yeah. Because then I can't win. Yes, I can't win if he does it somewhere else. So anyway, Mike, man, you're one of the guys I really look up to. I don't get starstruck very often, and met quite a few people in the NBA, but I really admire people that are down to earth but damn good at what they do. You're very thorough. If you guys aren't following Mike on Twitter and on Draft Express, where he's the director of scouting, you've been following the NBA draft wrong for as many years as you've been doing it. Catch him at draftexpress.com, on Twitter at Mike_Schmitz. And Mike, man, thanks so much for coming on, man.
Yeah, fellas, I appreciate it, man. You guys do great work. So happy to come on anytime.
Fantastic. All right, folks. I'm Pete from Laker Film Room at Laker Film Room. Been joined by Darius Soriano at Form Blue and Gold. Produced as always by Tom at LFR Tommy. We'll catch you guys next time.